Okay. No, honestly, like I'm so happy we ran into each other in the street corner in Boston. That was so
Yeah, what
random,
are the
dude.
odds?
I haven't seen you. We haven't seen each other in
It's been like
years.
10
I mean,
years.
okay, not 10 years. I'm still in my 20s.
Okay.
And what year did you graduate from FSU? 2015?
Let's see, 2014 December. Yeah.
But you like left 2015
Yeah,
because
when
I
did
still
you?
remember seeing you, I think my senior year. Oh my God, you're right. It's been 8 years. Oh my God, time goes by so fast.
I know, I know. Yeah, and I kind of miss it sometimes when you're like, man, back then you're like so almost carefree with everything that's going on. But then at some point you're like, okay, how does the real world look like? And after that, you're like, man, those were some good times back then. We really take it for granted.
Oh my God, one for sure. I always think about things like we should have done instead of just partying so much. And like the res and the free comedy shows and everything that we like should have taken more advantage of. But and I would do anything to have
Yeah.
things like that again, but we don't. But I mean, I definitely enjoyed my time in college. I know we did party a lot. But I we did a lot. And thankfully, I ran into you. I saw you walk by us in a corner in Boston in the dark and I was like, "Kevin?" And now here we are. So I'm so happy. So my little trekkers, I want to introduce you to an old friend of mine from college, Kevin.
Kevin here. Super excited to be here. Yeah, no, what are the odds, Dickie? I definitely, I'm like dark alleyway in Boston. What are the odds? Just me walking one way, you're walking the other, and it's like, hey, oh my God. And that just happened. It was a month ago, 2 months ago. Yeah.
Right? It was perfect because you're traveling alone right now. It was 4th of July weekend and you were there by yourself. So it's like, "Oh, join us on our plans." And it's so funny that we ended up having the same plans. We all were like, "Let's go to a Fenway baseball game on 4th of July." And you also had tickets. So it worked out perfectly. So we didn't have to change plans or anything.
Yeah. Nothing. I think that's the thing to do, right? And it was 4th of July, so just catching the fireworks too, and all that. That was just, I think, the perfect cherry on top. It was just such a fantastic weekend.
It really was. It really was. And so, Kevin, now we're going to go into how you've become the traveler you are now because post FSU, you went straight into the work field, correct? Well, I mean, great that you had a job lined up post grad. So, what was the motivator or maybe something that happened in your life that made you be like, okay, I'm tired of just doing the 9 to 5 life and made you think, hey, I want to start traveling because you've been solo traveling or meeting up with friends for like a while now.
I think it's something that has been culminating over time, just seeing everything that's out there in the world. You see things, you hear things, and sometimes you just want to see it for yourself. And on the flip side, there's also time, and time, if you notice, goes on. There's so many people that I've always wanted to visit and or go somewhere with, and I just haven't had the chance over the years to do it. But just finally being able to do that and all the friends, all the colleagues I've met in the last year or so that I've been really traveling around, like has allowed me sort of to reinvigorate and reconnect in a way that, like, if hadn't I put myself there, like you might not connect that way, like ever. So it really is just about positioning yourself. I feel like now I wasn't always this way. Um, Previously, I would definitely work around my schedule at work and just find time to travel on maybe on the weekend for a long weekend or maybe twice a year go somewhere for a nice destination. But really being out and about the way it is now really has um, allowed me to just be everywhere at once. It feels like.
I mean, I think it's amazing. Also, you work remote, you work in operations, you work remote. So you literally have the dream life that you're able to have a steady paycheck and just kind of go all around. Obviously, the hours kind of get a little crazy, especially when you're international. But did you quit your job and then decide to travel, or did you get this job and you're like, okay, I'm remote. Now I can live the life I want to live?
It really came down to the opportunity as far as before this job, I was working all 5 days a week from the office, and it really I think that what really kicked it off first off was the pandemic, and definitely tragic event, and there is very few pros that came out of that, which one of them being, hey, all of a sudden there's this new need for workers to go remote, and being home, sort of in the same room during that time was tough, right? I think it even spurred even more like the desire to sort of, hey, that life is more than just being in your house. Life is really about going out there and doing what you do best and just enjoy life. And my enjoyment really is traveling. Um, but yeah, being remote as of in the last year or so has allowed me to really take advantage and do what I enjoy in that regard.
And I think that's amazing. I think it's great what you're doing. I love that. You are where are me a few years ago, except like you have a remote job, so you're able to literally just travel and work. You're the definition of a digital nomad. Honestly, when you talk to me, you tell me your stories, I'm like, "Oh my god, I want to do that again. I miss that." Like, it really like brings me back and I'm like, "I want to do that." Like I'll be your buddy. But obviously right now I can't. But I'm truly like so like excited for you. You were all over the Northeast, and then now you've been all around the West Coast, and then you're gonna go to Europe. I mean, so what are
Mhm.
your future plans? Like, tell people what have you been doing the last few weeks post July 4th that we hung out in Boston.
So I know it's just there's so many things, and I'll begin with you know s- the way I've been traveling. It's been in somewhat um, it's been to places that I haven't been before. So that's one thing. In the last 6 weeks or so, I've been in the West Coast, and right now just hitting some of those cities along the way. So starting with this trip in Seattle, then Vancouver for a brief time, and then Portland, San Francisco, um, Los Angeles, and then San Diego will be the last stop. And a lot of this is preparation because you have to know exactly what you are looking for when you travel. One thing is just popping up and saying, "Hey, I'm here. Now, what do I do next?" You don't want to be in that
Mhm.
situation. You want to be ready going in. And there's different ways to do that nowadays. There's a really cool tool, Chat GPT. You just ask it, "Hey, what are some cool 10 things that I can do?" And yeah, really just execute. I think it's having a plan, but also not having a plan. Like it's being ready for something that is so spontaneous. How do you prepare for that? It's not a easy question to answer, but you can always go in with an idea of what you want to accomplish. And typically for me, it's been going to some of the most famous places, things that I've dreamed as a kid, always growing up, saying, "Oh my, this yesterday I just walked by the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I'd never done that, but I've seen it on TV so many times." So having sort of like a short list leading up to the trip I think, is really important and takes some time. Um, Also, the different bookings, accommodations, knowing where to eat, all that again adds to that preparation. And yeah, aside from work, also finding ways to stay healthy, I think has been a sort of a time consuming element just because it's very easy to, let's just say, get out of shape, after just traveling and eating some of the best foods because you want to try all the best local foods.
That's true.
Um, so it's important to stay healthy, and just all of that is like it adds up to the preparation. Yeah.
So what do you do to stay healthy?
Yeah, it really comes down to selective eating in some ways. There's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I stick to that, usually with a light breakfast, sometimes an almond croissant, sometimes a bagel. um, something along those lines. And then for lunch, something simple where won't fill you up so much. Sushi, very popular, and maybe a little bit of rice, meat. That's what I usually seek out. And then I hold out till dinner. But it's super easy to just like snack away. You see ice cream everywhere. You want to have ice cream. I'm not much of a
Mhm.
sweets guy, so I'm lucky in that department. But for travelers that are looking to travel this way, I know it could be a little tough, but it's really very important to sort of stay disciplined and stay healthy while you travel. Yeah.
So I know most of the times you stay at hotels. Like, would you consider yourself a bougie traveler or a budget traveler? I have my
Yeah.
answer for you.
So that's a good question. Yeah. No, it's like, you know, I think a healthy medium between the two. Um, One, you have to travel based on sort of what your budget allows. I feel like staying in hostels for me at this point in at time, I need some space to be able to work and do what I do for my profession. So ultimately, you do have to always look for that next level. But nothing special. I feel like it's always just places that are very central is key because you do save a lot on transportation coming in and out of the city. Like, say, if you are outside of the city, you have to think of all of the commuting time and costs, because time is probably the most important thing.
Oh, for
So
sure.
just finding central locations that are decent and have good Wi-Fi, that's the spot. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I think you're a little bit of a bougie traveler, but in a good way. In a good way. It's true what you said. You're smart. You stay central. How come you never stay at Airbnbs? Like, do you just never want to cook your food, or you just enjoy, or you have the budget to enjoy eating out every night and every day?
Yeah, so I know I do check both Airbnb and Booking.com. I say are my two biggest. And Booking lately has gone, I don't know if it's more offerings, but just better rates in general than Airbnb. So
Mhm.
I would suggest travelers to look into that if they haven't already. But yeah, no, it's not really about necessarily avoiding the kitchen. I love to. Well, I want to say I'm always in the kitchen when I'm home, but it's I think it's more of just what's easier in terms of time and being able to be close always to like cafes, close to breakfast diners. That's typically the game plan for me. But yeah, I definitely encourage travelers to work around with what they got or what they prefer. Like if you prefer going to say there's hostels that have kitchens that have great facilities. So like for example, Airbnbs generally have good kitchens as well. So yeah, just finding the right balance there as well for the food.
Sure. I mean, when I was like more of a nomad, we were obviously budget travelers. So we would stay at hostels, and I'd always meet digital nomads, and I'd be like,
Hmm.
how can you work being a digital nomad and staying at a hostel? But surprisingly, a lot of hostels now are, well, trying to be a little more digital nomad friendly, and people will work, and there's like designated office spaces. But I will say, America, we're a little lacking on those. I feel that we do have digital nomad spots, but they're hotels or accommodations. I mean, I don't know if you ever like looked into them and stuff. I know in Miami and downtown and Wynwood, they're building a really big
I think
one.
so.
It looks super
Yeah.
dope. So
Hmm.
if I ever like stumble upon it when it's done, I'll definitely let you know. But I can definitely agree that at least you're being smart. You're choosing a budget. You're staying central, and you want your own space. Because I mean, hostels are great, but I will say in America they don't really have offer private rooms. Because I would say, hey, that's a great way to save money if you have
Hmm.
a private room. But if that's the case, if you, if it's in your budget, dude, keep living, keep doing what you're
Yeah,
doing, because
you could do anything.
hotels sometimes are just so nice to like at the end of the day to get there and do your own thing.
Yeah, and hotels, I feel like are just as could be as surprising as let's say hostels or apartments, just because there's been times where you might come across a hotel that says, hey, we're it's a 4-star hotel, and then it's a 8 out of 10 in Booking.com, and to your surprise, it's nowhere near that, and so
Oh
that's
my
been a
god.
challenge, or an interesting challenge, just finding the right place sometimes, because you're not always going for the bougie per se, but it's like a combination of that and the budget and finding the right place. And yeah, yeah, there's definitely a lot of situations where you're like, man, should I have like maybe paid a bit more to do a different location or a different spot? Yeah.
As long as it's clean and it's a good spot and the Wi-Fi works, I think it'll be okay. But it's definitely happened. I feel you. You get there, you're like, this is not what it looks like in the pictures. It's the worst. So what
Yeah,
about your
yeah, and
job?
it's like, yeah,
No, no, keep going,
okay,
keep
yeah, my
going.
so what I do is
No, 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 no.
yeah,
You can keep going
the
with what you're saying. I hear what you're saying about the lagging because I'm like waiting a few seconds because I know it's like
uh-huh,
lagging, and then I hear it because you'll be sitting there
okay,
and then you respond after 2 or 3 seconds. But it's fine. I'm just gonna edit it
that's
after.
it.
But
Okay,
no, I don't know why
no
it's
worries.
happening, but whatever. Um. Okay, so does your job allow, like, I know you're obviously remote, but does your job know that you bounce around so much, or do they just care for you to do your job and that's it?
Yeah, so it's definitely important to have like good communication with everyone you work with, and like in my case, everyone is aware that I'm traveling and going to different locations, and you want to you want to always abide with what your employer allows, right? So definitely having a remote culture is cool because it encourages the flexibility, and there's been studies out there where they say productivity goes down if folks are working from home and this and that. But like personally, I guess it depends a lot on the person. But I've been able to thankfully always dedicate enough time to get the job done, which ultimately allows to enjoy the other side, which is to actually travel and take
Mhm.
advantage of that part of the time. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, for sure. I'm like, a huge fan of working from home. I don't think it's necessary to go into an office every day. I think they should just pay people more if you're gonna work remote. As long as you get your work done, it's okay. I mean, it depends on the job because I know my sister works remote, but she's like literally on the clock. She
Mhm.
clocks in at a time and has to clock out her breaks and everything. Is your job like that, or is it more task based and as long as you get your work done, it's okay?
Yeah, it depends. Now it's definitely more around the well, let's say the stock market hours, because that is typically when is the trading is open, and us in the operations front for a finance company, we always have to be on the desk or sort of on top of any time things any hiccups can happen. Someone always has to be there. So I am bound by this Eastern time, which, being in different places, you have to work around that. So being in the West Coast, instead of waking up, let's just say at 7:30 in Eastern time, I have to wake up maybe 5:30 Pacific to be on time
Oof.
and get the job. Now, for example, you start early, you end early. Just like if you start later, you end later. And so yeah, just adjusting to the time zone is definitely a challenge. Um, if you're really motivated, I think you can get used to it maybe like in a few days, but it really depends on the person. Because yeah, waking up at 5:30 Monday through Friday, it's not for everybody.
Yeah, it's tough for sure. I mean, my sister, when she was visiting me in Vegas, she had to do the same hours, East Coast, but be staying in the Pacific side. And she would be
Mhm.
waking us up at 5:15. I'd be like, oh, please turn the alarm off. It's so loud.
Ooh.
But it's like you said, you make it work. And then she'd be done work early. I would study in the morning too. We'd get our stuff done. And we'd have the whole day to explore We'd go to a bunch of pool parties. We had the whole day. I mean, obviously we didn't like stay out too late. We try to cut it at 11, be home
Mhm.
and by 11, 11:30
Mhm.
latest to get at least a few night hours of sleep. But as long as it's temporary, it's okay. Well, I mean, I know some people enjoy waking up at 5:30 a.m., but forever and they're fine with it. I don't think I could be one of those people.
Mhm.
For me, 7:30 a.m. or 7 is the earliest I can wake up and be functional, but that's
Yeah.
cuz I go to sleep late cuz of, my lifestyle. But what actually, sorry, can you give me a second? I need to close my dad's office door cuz I can hear him talking on the
Yeah,
phone with his people and it's just
no
like
worries.
I don't want it to interact in the thing. Okay, so what other than
Oh
the time
my.
difference, what other I guess what's the word? What other negatives would you say is to just like traveling around as a digital nomad?
Yeah, so negatives, I think it's more, um, I would phrase it this way. It's almost like challenging yourself to some way because if you think about it, at least the way I've been traveling, you're in a different place, probably like every 7 days or so, let's say. So, um, one thing is you always got have to adapt, I feel like, to where you are, and every place surprisingly is very different, even within the same country or within the same state, let's say. Um, so I feel like that first day when you get to somewhere, it's always like, where am I? This discovery, you feel
Yep.
like you're like, I don't know, someone that just discovered a new city, but I think in your mind, you're like trying to figure out landmarks and like figuring out exactly where you are. And I feel like that process is always a bit challenging for a day or two because you almost like feel lost. Um, other things, I'd say, yeah, it's always being on top of the even something simple as the Wi-Fi is very important because you want to make sure that you have good connection, and in my case, that you're able to work at a good pace. Because if there's a little bit of lag, that can severely impact your work experience. So always good practice, I'd say, is when you get to a place, you always want to test the internet. There's like you just Google it, test internet speed, and right away you can find out if you have good Wi-Fi. Depending on what you do, there is like if you're in a lot of calls, you might want 20, 30, 40 megabytes per second.
Mhm.
Anything less could really hinder your performance in your calls. So little things like that. Um, yeah, I'd say those two things.
No, I mean that's true. That's a huge tip about the internet speed. I never thought of getting somewhere and checking the internet speed because I just rely on the reviews and then when I get there I'm like, okay, either works or doesn't. And I've had problems in the past when I was working remote and the Wi-Fi wasn't working and it was just a disaster. So I think that thank you for that tip.
Mm,
And I totally get it. When you get somewhere, you feel a little bit lost. Like you said, even if it's in the same country or city, it really is. You have to get your bearings a little bit because every flow is different. You learn the public transportation. You have to kind of find your way around, not get lost. But I think that's the exciting part because you are literally have a new adventure, as you said, every 7 days or so. I mean, that's so fun. I think that's great,
mm.
honestly.
Yeah, no, and really, um, that kind of helps if as the more you do it, the more you get used to sort of that schedule and that sort of that experience. Um, I'd say another negative too is which just thought popped in my head was, being on the road for so long, right? You also miss out on a lot of events that are going back home. So that's another thing that I would flag too.
Yep.
It's also, especially being away for extended periods of time. Um, one thing is you might catch up, be on the phone, and you're always aware of what's going on, but you really feel it when you go back and you're like, oh my, things have changed. So and so, I guess focusing on other things and this and that. So in general, I'd say that's a challenge that travelers face. I feel like, especially if you're away for a long period of time.
Oh my god, yes. That is one of the things that That for me is probably the biggest negative when I was traveling. You can't be everywhere at once. I try to be that person and it's so hard. But I agree, like you sometimes have to choose with, going home for someone's birthday or a wedding or something, or just staying where you are. I mean, if you're in LA, coming back to Florida is
Hmm.
pretty easy, but if you're in Europe or Asia, it's not that easy. You kind of you definitely have to pick and
Yeah,
choose and
exactly.
choose your battles. So I will say I agree. Everyone moves on with their life. You get home and everything is a little different, but I still think you're choosing the right route. So when exactly, you said pandemic, but when did you start, traveling as consistently as you've been traveling now? Because I know you tend to take little breaks and you go home, but for the most part, it sounds like, well, from what you've told
Hmm.
me, that you've just been consistently traveling for a time.
Yeah, yeah. The last year or so, I'd say, is the official like mark when I said, "Hey, I'm moving all my stuff to a storage unit and pretty much I get along with just what I have on my carry-on. So packing light, that's another good tip. It's
Oh
easy to
my
move around,
God.
but
A carry on? Props to you. Props to you. I don't know how you do it, just a carry on for so long. But you're a dude, that's why.
yeah. No, yeah, I think it's a little easier for us. But there's also there's a lot of learning curves too. I feel like along the way there where um, being always at home, you take for granted your laundry, for example. There's the washer, the dryer. It's yours. You use it every day, all day, or excuse me, every week, or however often you wash it. But when you're in different cities, and many times you don't have access to it, let's say in your hotel or in the Airbnb. Like in my case, always finding a laundromat, that's always been something that it requires a bit of homework. You know, you want to make sure you go to one that has decent reviews and that won't destroy your clothes. Also, one that might not be in a bad location. So, um, like little things like that, when you're on the road, and in my case, like very little clothes, that's been top of mind. Like every couple days, I'm like, all right, well, it's time to seek out a a new laundromat because you're in a different city. Um,
Of
Fortunately, I
course.
haven't had any issues there, so that's good. But and then back to the other question, yeah, it's been about a year, and uh, definitely take breaks in between. So not like your traditional, let's say, like the person that goes away for a year completely. I actually have the benefit of going back for usually a few days or a few weeks after 1 to 2 months, I'd say. Um, just because yeah, family is really important for me, and that's something I really I treasure, and I try not to miss any family event. So little things like that always keep me going back, but incentivize me to also keep traveling. So it's like the fuel.
And what you obviously, you're a little you're a seasoned traveler now. I can say it's been a year. What what do you know now that you when you first started traveling like this, what was something that you really
Mhm.
wish you knew back then that you know now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a lot of and not to sound like all knowledgeable, but it's like all the things that you see, day in and day out when you're traveling and you're in new places. Um, I'd say one thing I would tell myself going back is, actually writing down a lot of what you see because you'd be surprised about just all the little things that people do on a daily basis, routinely through whichever city, whichever country you're in, that um, is a bit different than what you are accustomed to. It's as if like you just uh, in the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy leaves Kansas, or how I phrase it sometimes, it's like you're like in a bubble, and you kind of go out of this bubble, and it's like this whole new world. So I feel like I would tell myself to be more strict with writing sort of like a memoir or like writing everything that's happening because those are things that us like we tend to forget over time. And one thing I hope to go back to is actually a lot of the pictures and videos I took, and a few things I did write. But if I was more strict, I'd have uh, a lot of good content. But I think I can go back on the memory and to the memory and flesh some of that out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I think that's also a great tip you said, but that's also why now I write down everything. In my notes, I write down, okay, where I ate, where I went. Obviously for me because I podcast and I blog and stuff like that, but it's just nice to remember, and then also you can give people tips. Hey, like I went here, it was great. Oh, that place wasn't so good, blah blah blah. But especially when you're such a seasoned traveler, people are going to come to you over time and be like, "Hey Kevin, what tips can you give me? Hey, what can you do? What should I do in this city? What should I avoid?" And it's also good for just your memory because if you ever go back, you want to go back, try to go back to the same place you went. Or sometimes it's just nice to even just remember what you did for your own sake. But I like that tidbit that you said,
Hmm.
oh, because every country or every city has their own culture, and you write down what people are doing. I really like that because it's a nice little thought of how,
Yeah.
just to remember every place. Because I will say, after a while, when you start traveling so much consistently, you don't think you're gonna forget, but you will forget. Things sometimes start blending in together, it glazes over. It's just natural.
Yeah, yeah, it's supernatural. At some point, I was able to keep track with this Google Maps tool. If for travelers out there, strongly recommend it because it's a good way you could
Hmm.
essentially save all the places you've been, whether it's restaurants, whether it's landmarks, anything that you can then later share with anyone who you want to share that you, let's say, might know your family member, your friend is going to said place. You can then forward them the list that you have created um, to them. So a quick plug there for Google Maps. Uh, but definitely, I think, like you said, Nikki, it's we take memory for granted, so it's really just figuring out ways to memorialize it and essentially tell your story. Tell your story uh, to and anyone that's traveling. It's like you're sort of embodying. You're going down this path that not many people are able to go. So there's always going to be an audience. There's always going to be people that want to hear what you as a traveler go through, and that's for me. That's something that I'm excited when I go back and formalize it. Excited to share at some point.
Love that tip that you said about using Google Maps to pinpoint your stuff and then send it out to your friends. I've actually never heard about that. I'm definitely gonna start doing that
Yeah.
now. That's another little tip. Too bad my a few episodes ago I said about my favorite travel tips, but I can throw that in into an episode in the future. And you've mainly been solo traveling this whole past year. I mean, other I know sometimes you've met up with people, stuff like that, but for the most part, you solo travel.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So fortunately, it's been a combination of meeting up with folks and solo traveling. I would say right now it's about 50% of the travel is solo. But the beauty of it is like everywhere I've been, I'd say 9 out of 10 times, I actually know someone that lives there or it happens to be visiting there. Um, I'll give you an example. Like earlier this
Well,
year,
so
I
lucky.
was
What the
in Sao
heck?
Paulo, Brazil. Yeah, and there it was, after a few cities in there in Brazil, um, I didn't know anyone going into Sao Paulo, and all of a sudden, a cousin of mine, Brandon, reaches out. Hey, Kev, I see you're in Sao Paulo. I'm there too. I'm like, oh my God, what are the odds? I met with my cousin there, and we had a good time. But um, those are the moments that you also think about it. You met up with someone that you know on the other side of the world, and shared that experience with them. Um, same ways with other trips in Europe. I've been luckily. fortunate enough to have colleagues of mine, friends, come out and or go out
So
and,
blessed.
and conquer the world. You know, really do cool things out there. We saw. I'll give you an example. We you know met up with. We got together with a friend and went to Iceland and another group of friends in Croatia. And then yeah, just kind of hopping around.
My next question was going to be, oh, do you ever get lonely solo traveling? But clearly not. You already answered the question. That's amazing. You are so blessed that everywhere you go, you have people. Because I've truly done solo traveling and I've just had to make friends. And I was gonna ask you, do you make
Hmm.
friends when you're there? But it seems like you already have friends. So what the heck? You're so
Yeah.
lucky. That's so great. That's so great. And your cousin in Brazil, and you
No,
don't even
thank
know
you.
that
Yeah.
they're there. That's like, what are the chances for that to happen?
I know, and no, and Nikki, you bring up a very good point. You know, and in the ones that I truly, let's say, am solo, and in the solo travel, and might not know anyone there. Yeah, you know, I will say it does. It can, you know, sort of come to you where it's like, I don't know anybody here, but I got to do something about it. And that's what I tell myself. And pretty much what I do is I look for ways to meet people. And I'll give an example like uh, Airbnb Experiences has a great sort of platform there where you can just search and see what is going on in the city that you're staying. Um, and you can, and oftentimes the events that you see there are like, um, let's say whether it's a bar crop, but let's say you want to learn a skill or a craft, or you want to take a tour, so a guided tour somewhere with a peer-reviewed tour guide. You know, those are the things that really get out there, and I also have been able to meet great people all around the world because of that. And um, yeah, I would plug that into there. Airbnb experiences, highly recommend. Um, but you can also find in TripAdvisor and some other tools. Other ultimately, yeah, it's really getting out of that shell. Sometimes you're in a city you don't know and you want to familiarize yourself. What better way than to meet people? And those last a lifetime. So been very fortunate there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you travel by yourself, you definitely have to find your way to meet people, especially if you're not staying at a hostel or, somewhere that is made for digital nomads. And it's great that you choose to do an experience because one, you're probably going to do it anyways. You might as well do it with people. So share with us your favorite I guess your favorite experience you've done with like a group when you've been by yourself and we just went from there.
Yeah, yeah, that's a tough question because it's so many good places and so many good experiences. But the one place I would tell that advise anyone to like really go out of their way to check it out in general is this trip Iceland. Iceland was able to visit, and that place is just this nature that's beyond anywhere that I've seen anywhere in this planet. Um, yeah, it was me and a friend, and we essentially did a tour of the whole island. You can rent a car and drive around the entirety of the island. And there, you'll see a lot of waterfalls. You'll see a lot of hikes that you can do. And yeah, that's essentially that was the rhythm, you know, just getting to see those landmarks and trying the food and talking to the people. You realize it's easy to communicate with a lot of folks abroad because you might encounter folks that speak English, and if you don't, then you always try. You always try to communicate somehow, um, and those are the lasting experiences. But Iceland, by far, is the most let's just say wicked place in a good way that I've been to so far.
No, you're literally I love that you're like answering questions like no you're giving me answers that I haven't asked that I'm going to ask you questions for, but it's perfect. I don't think I
Oh,
worded it right, but I meant to say, what was the best like Airbnb experience you did by yourself that because you said you would that's how you would meet people. So I guess what was the
Mhm.
best one you've done or your favorite one you've done?
Yeah, and I think I have the perfect one for you. So this one, um, it was 2 days after everyone that I was on in my trip in Europe, they had left, and I wasn't sure what to do by myself. I was in Milan, Italy, and I look on the app, like, what should I do tonight? Oh, really important. It was my birthday at midnight. I'm like, what should I do? I don't
Oh
know
my
anybody here. Who
god.
do I spend my birthday with? So I was like, I see this cool pub crawl. I really got to go out there and meet people, especially if it's my birthday, and really celebrate somehow. And fortunately enough, I find this pub crawl right in the middle of the city, and long and behold, I meet a great group of people. I mean, and I got people there in that group from literally all over, folks that are from the UK, I met someone from Dominican Republic there, from the States, just all over. And after, a couple, let's say, rounds of drinks, because it is a bar crawl after all, let's say hit midnight, and they knew it was my birthday. So um, we all took sort of these celebratory shots, and it was courtesy of the tour guide, things that he might not have done on a normal tour of his, but just to sort of make my personal experience special. And I think the group really enjoyed it. We all really got to bond just that night. And thanks to Airbnb experiences, I was able to find that and book that tour. Yeah.
You hear that Airbnb experiences? You should sponsor this podcast. We've mentioned you a good amount and have raved about you. So just throwing it out there. No, but I love
Oh yeah.
that. I mean, it sucks none of your friends could stay through your actual birthday, but I think that's the best thing when you especially in Europe or Asia, it's such a great place to solo travel, and the fact that you were able to just join this experience, but do a pub crawl and just make friends and ring in your birthday in a beautiful way is so special because you never the worst thing is to be alone on your birthday. And the fact that these strangers just made it so important, that shows that when you all have the same mindset, you just want the same thing, like it's you don't have to be friends and you're still going to have a great time.
Absolutely. And those are folks that thankfully, thanks to like platforms like Instagram, you keep in touch with. And if
Mhm.
you're ever in their neck of the woods, I'm sure they'll invite you and want to meet up with you. And likewise, right? So, um, yeah, and there are some times that I've met already with folks that I have met in other places, and it's just great ways to keep connecting. Yeah.
Oh my god, for sure. Even though it's so hard to actually link up with these people cuz that's the sad part about traveling, that half the time everyone just lives everywhere. If you can even see someone once in 3 years, it's a beautiful miracle. But that's true. You can just hit them up. You stay in touch through social media. You figure it out. You do your thing. Or you never know. One day you could link up, even if it's years later. A friend I traveled with years ago, and then she came to Miami and I interviewed her for my podcast. So, and it had been like 5 years since I last
Oh
saw her.
wow.
So, that's the beauty about having friends like that. Also, when you go somewhere that they
Mhm.
live, you can hopefully stay with them. They can show you around. It's really great. And to just backtrack a little bit, when you told your family and your friends, "Hey, I'm remote and I'm just going to be a digital nomad and travel everywhere," what were people's reactions to that?
Yeah, that really is a good question. I'll start with like family and friends. It's sort of like a bag of mixed feelings, It's because they know that you're going to be away for such a long time in some capacity, that it's almost like feeling like almost like losing someone, like, oh no, don't go. And also just on the flip side, excited because they, like in my family's case, it's like they know that that's a passion of mine. That's something that I've always wanted to pursue in some ways. Growing up, having traveled to different places, having studied abroad twice in college, Um, so in some ways, it wasn't a surprise. It was just good timing. And it's always hard to go away for some time, but you know, you always come back. I feel like hardened and like with a bunch of stories to share. Um, and also, I would say, like in general, whether it's friends or family, it's always like this sense of uh, not exactly knowing the, let's say, the amount of time or dedication that's about to unfold. You know, when like I started going on this adventure, I would say, "Hey, like, yeah, you know, I'm gonna start traveling and be a digital nomad essentially." And folks were like, "Oh, okay, no, sounds amazing, but." Like, okay, let's see what you do. And folks, you know, 3 months later are actually very surprised that I'm still traveling, that I was still traveling, and they didn't expect that essentially I would take such a leap. And here I am 12 months later, and to everyone's surprise, everyone is uh, still sort of like uh, in awe, but also at the same time rooting, you know, rooting for me and sort of pushing me to really do what I enjoy. So it's almost like this sense of surprise and excitement. Yeah.
I think it's also because you're a boy that people are a little more okay with it. Because I swear, when you're a girl and you tell them that, they really look at you as if you were a crazy alien. But I love that. It seems that most people were supportive of your decision. And obviously, you proved them wrong when, months later, you're still traveling and doing your thing. And as far as your last year of remote travel, where have you gone?
Yeah, so it really the last year started off with a bit of time in Italy. Was able to see essentially all the way from Rome to Milan and Como area. Um, then also visited Colombia, Medellin particularly. Um, then some place in the States like New York City. Um, Also in the beginning did Cincinnati as well. But went home for 2 weeks in like winter break time, Christmas, New Year's. And then that's when I was like, okay, on the first, I'm going to make a huge leap, and I would tell everybody, hey, yeah, I'm just gonna travel. But just to backtrack a little bit, how I determined where I was gonna go on January 1st was actually based on who was gonna win the World Cup final. And if we rewind a year, it was France versus Argentina in the World Cup final, and I decided once Argentina won. So the first place I went to after that game, I booked the flight to Argentina starting this year, and Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, and different cities in Canada. Um, let's see. Also, uh, this trip have been to Czech Republic, Sweden, Denmark, Germany. Um, let's see. And quite a few more in Europe,
So
and
you
then
really have just hopped all
also quite a
around.
few cities in the States. Yeah, yeah, it really is all over the place, but a lot of it is convenience in terms of location. You know, if a place is not too far away and I have the amount of time, then I just jump to it and I'm able to go. And that's part of the reason why I'm doing West Coast is just that it's so easy to jump from city to city in the West Coast as opposed to leaving and coming back one day in the future. So fortunately for me, like I just travel based on that as well.
I love that you chose to go to Argentina because they won. And I'm thinking, but that's the summer. But because where it was located, they did it in December. So it's actually a pretty smart idea because you probably went there and it was probably crazy still from the win. Must have been so
Ooh,
fun.
everyone, everyone was just jumping up and down. The streets were just covered. This was about 2 weeks after, and like you could still feel the energy when you would go out. Let's say, and everyone was just like unusually happy, to and understandably so. This is Argentina's biggest sport, so being there in such a special time, like there's no that's priceless.
Oh, for sure. And it's so cheap there too, so you were able just to go everywhere, so it makes it even better. And what is your future? What future travel plans do you have after the West Coast?
Yeah, I think coming up, well, after this, we'll be venturing off to the Caribbean for about a week, for a company event, and after that, then going to visit Spain and Portugal, um, and really get to know it. I have been to Spain before, so I guess it does break that rule of the first time.
Yep.
But I will say there are many cities all around the country that are worth visiting. I've only been to Barcelona, Madrid, and Valencia, but apparently there's so many great cities to visit in the south of Spain and the north of Spain and just Portugal in general. That I haven't been there, so really excited to check some of those places out.
Yes, Valencia. That's where I studied. Portugal is amazing. It's so beautiful. I've only been to one city. I've only been to Porto. It was so romantic though, and I was by myself. I was like, okay. I will say the only negative thing about that is that in Porto, there was a lot of it was a great meal deals, but it would be for two people. And I would tell them, "Oh, I'm by myself. Can I just pay the price of one?" And they would tell me, "No, you have to pay the price for the two people because that's just the deal." I was like, I have never felt so single in my life. And for some reason in the hostel I stayed at, I didn't really make friends with people. So I just explored a few days by myself. It was no biggie before I linked up with other friends in Spain, but I will say it's amazing. It's and the good thing is because you speak Spanish, you can communicate with them. They speak to you in Portuguese, you just run back in Spanish. It's just such a beautiful place. I'm so happy for you. And then are you just buying a one-way ticket to Europe, or do you think you're gonna come back home after Europe for just, a little bit break